Welcome to the Dinner Dreaming Off the Gridiron podcast. Today is a special episode. Not NFL, not UFC, not
Nope.
boxing, not NBA, none of that shit. It is WWE, specifically the recap of the Netflix DocuSeries, Mr. McMahon.
This
So,
is the official Mr. McMahon recap, y'all.
yes, sir, the recap on the Digital Dream Off the Gridiron podcast. So, anyways, let me first get your thoughts. What was your overall impressions of the documentary True 4?
Well, I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, I already saw all that.
Right.
And it was one of those things where it was like I like I like hearing about what the inner workings, but it's like we already know about the inner workings because we were there. And
Right.
I mean, if you weren't there, then it's different. You know what I'm saying? But being there being there makes it feel different. Like being there is like, okay, I knew what happened because I was watching it live.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what happened because this is what this looked like on this side, and they didn't used to
Right.
share these angles. You know what I mean? I know what happened then.
I think so too. I mean, obviously, any wrestling fan, die hard, like we talked about, we've been wrestling fans for 27, almost 30 years now. So, I mean,
Don't
for us,
remind
I
me.
mean, yeah. So for us, I mean, and being die-hard wrestling fans, wrestling being my first love, it was nothing that was, out of the ordinary. However, it was very telling. It was very telling because there are certain aspects, and we're going to talk about it now, because there are aspects of Vince's life which I was otherwise not privy to, and aspects of the wrestling business that, I mean, some little tidbits here and there, not too much that are shocking, but little tidbits here and there. So let's kind of get into it. Starting off the documentary, it starts off with Vince K. McMahon Jr.'s personal life, growing up in a trailer park, with his mom and his stepdad, basically growing up poor, poverty, right? Abject poverty
Mhm.
down in South Carolina or North Carolina. I forgot which one. I think North Carolina. And then obviously he didn't actually meet his biological father, Vincent J. McMahon, Vince Senior, until he was a young adult. And he thought that when he met him, like he was full of pride and vigor. We thought he'd give him a hug, but his dad was a very tough-minded kind of individual. Being a businessman, and we can see where that kind of that was a foreshadow, kind of how that passed on to Vince, right? To in his business, kind of his mantra. But anyways, kind of long story short, obviously Vince grew up poor and growing up poor. Hey, I see you, baby. I like the U.S. title. I see you. Vince basically growing up poor kind of shaped his early life, which I personally didn't know about. I thought Vince was basically born with a silver spoon in his mouth, which was very interesting.
So
And then
I
kind of
knew that Vince wasn't. I knew this because back in the day, I was big on Vince McMahon because
uh-huh.
unlike most people, like a lot of kids never watch late night television. A
Yeah.
lot of kids, I was a big late night television kid. Like, you
Right.
know, throwing back the original like Adult Swim before when Adult Swim wasn't every night. Adult Swim used to only be one night a week, and it was Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
had to catch Adult Swim, and then they got Friday and Saturday all the way into Sunday, because it got so big and there were so many shows. But Vince got to be on, a couple like David Letterman. He got to be on Letterman, and I remember that, and Vince was a quirky guy. Like he was the announcer,
Right.
and and most people had like most fans didn't really know that Vince owned the company because he didn't always talk about it.
Right.
They treated him like an announcer. And
Right. So
that's
we're gonna get
because
there.
he was an announcer with his dad. He was an announcer.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
we're gonna get into it. But yeah,
We're gonna get into it. Yeah, we're gonna get there. I want to just talk about his versus very early life. His very early upbringings, growing up in poverty in a trailer. Obviously, like not meeting his dad till he was a young adult. Or I
stepdad
guess
hated
teenage
him.
stepdad hated him, beat him. Obviously, like he ended up meeting his future wife. Back in was almost not almost over 55 years ago. When he was also a young adult. So like you said, now that was transition, right? Kind of, what he did. He did odd jobs. He always loved wrestling when after he met his father, and then obviously his biological father, and he wanted to get into it.
Well,
And
that's
his
when he
bio,
found out what it was.
right? That's when he found out what it was, and so obviously, like Vince Senior working with Bruno at the time, who was the world heavyweight champion of wrestling for 7 to 8 years consecutively, right? That was kind of what helped shape Vince's kind of view, and when he started being promoters through his dad, and his dad quoted them as friends, quote unquote, right? So he's like, you never ruffle feathers from your friends, you don't stab them in the back. that's when Vince Jr., like you said, started getting into it. Like when he started off as an announcer, he started off as kind of like, getting into promotion. Then it came a time when the kind of, turn of like late 70s, that's when Vince Sr. was starting to get out of it. And Vince Jr. basically wanted to basically take the helm and start expanding WWF, right? And essentially, Vince Sr. was not keen on expanding the business. Vince Jr. was basically very keen on that. And essentially, he wanted to take it to new heights. And the only way he could do that was actually his dad basically saying, because his dad, basically, WWF at that time was not profitable. This is before Hulk Hogan. This is before Iron Sheik. Obviously, you have Bob Backlund, but Bob Backlund was just basically kind of a vanilla kind of flavor, just like a really good wrestler, no charisma. Before the traditional wrestling superstar was actually formed.
Backlund to me, like, I never understood why, like, maybe they were really good friends, and for the era that like Backlund was, he was the guy, but like I thought there was better superstars than Bob Backlund to be the world heavyweight champion.
I agree.
And I thought there was, but we have to remember that like the WWE started in the Northeast.
Correct. It was actually, to your point, it was from Bangor, Maine, down to New York. So go ahead.
Yeah, and the Northeast did not have the same talent that the West did. They didn't have the same talent as the Midwest, and they didn't have the same talent as the South. And I think especially Texas, Texas had everything at one point in time, and so did Georgia. And I think that while he was competing with them, it actually helped him to switch the champions when he did, because I don't think that he could have gone national the same way with the same two champions, Bruno and Bob. I don't think that was possible.
Absolutely, and that's exactly like Bruno and Bob. Well, I mean, he was able to bring Bob back, but Bruno basically has that feud with Vince Jr. For the remainder of his life, right? And so, but like you said, right? I mean, and that was kind of where Vince Sr. was looking to sell WWF at that time because it was not profitable, and Vince Jr. wanted to buy it, and then Vince Sr. and his investors were laughing, because they're saying this kid thinks he can basically take over this show, and what the fuck does he know about wrestling? What does he know about actually running a business? I mean, he hasn't done any. And so basically said, okay, he's like here. So he basically said, I'll sell it to you, Vince. The only way you can do it is basically making payments on basically, on a loan, basically, on a monthly basis, you make payments. Once you finish satisfying your loan, then you get the keys, right? It's your business. You'll sign it over. And the way that Vince was able to promote and actually bring profitability, this is, again, before Hogan, he put the belt on Hogan, before you had Iron Sheik, this is like right before that. And basically then Vince was able to do it and make every single payment every month through generating revenue just by promoting the show and managing the show and doing it to where he shocked his dad and then took over the reins of the WWF. And then obviously, lo and behold, the rest was history. But now we're going to get into that history, right? Now we start with the next kind of segment of Vince now taking over the WWF. This is where the divergence between him and his father was, because his father, like you said about the Deep South, about what you said about
his
the
father
Midwest,
didn't want him to go national.
Correct. Vince Jr. did not want.
I'm gonna caveat here. I am a firm believer that Vince's father did a lot of things and said a lot of things because of his one age and two the network of people that he was in. Right. Because I think truly he always wanted to put those guys out of business. But I think that because of the handshake deals that they had all been doing for so many years, that he wasn't going to put them out of business, or even try, because let's face it, Ric Flair could have put him out of business.
Right.
Dusty probably could have put him out of business.
Oh, yeah.
And Dusty could have put him out of business as a booker, as a promoter, and as a wrestler. He could have put him out on three different levels. But I think that Vince Jr. waited for the requisite amount of time that to go national, and he also surprised everyone by doing it because no one thought that he was capable of it. And they thought that, okay, well, this kid's not going to be able to do anything, and we'll get this company back in 3 months.
Correct. 100%.
And if Vince mortgaged everyone's future on, that's not about to happen. He's better for it because I don't, guys, look, the 18 to 43 demographic is the biggest number for any professional sporting event. You're
Right.
looking at the 18 to 43 demographic. Like, you care about the kids, but you want to look at the 18 to 43 demographic because that's who spends money.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like those,
Yeah. No, sorry. I mean, I finish the thought because then I'm gonna
yeah,
segue.
that's who spends money. And I think that the old guys will look back on the territory days and be like, those are some fine days. But then you think about it and you're like, no, they're not. Look at all of the talent. Like, we have the territory days. You gonna
Right.
tell me that AEW is a competitor to the main roster of WWE? AEW can barely compete with TNA.
Right.
And the only reason why AEW competes with TNA is because AEW is backed by billionaires and TNA isn't.
And
To be
yes.
honest.
And now
It,
you're saying, okay, we're not in the 90s yet. We'll get there. We're gonna get there.
all
But
right, yeah,
let's kind of yeah,
we're
we're
gonna
gonna
stay
get
in
there.
the
Going.
80s.
Yes, sir. Let's wrap the 80s. All
I
right.
gotta get the shoulders to
Yes,
rest.
sir. Yes, sir. No. Let that shoulder rest. All right. Back to the point. To what you just said. Massive point. Promoters wrestling in the 80s, early 80s was very regional. This is before W, and so that's where Vince, being the creative mind he was and being the promoting genius that he was, basically kind of showed his chops in this early stages of his career as owner when he started to promote shows in an AWA, the Midwest, in your Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, right, your area in the Midwest. The AWA, Vern Jagney, basically owned that area. The South, Dusty Rhodes, right? Deep South Wrestling, the Ric Flair, right? Also, and then obviously NWA, right? I mean, that was also, the Texas, those regions, very regional kind of setup that they had, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, early 80s, up until Vince decided, fuck it. I'm going to basically start promoting these shows in the Midwest, in Texas, in Houston, in Dallas, in Minnesota, in Los Angeles, in Miami. Like, and this was unprecedented because basically these promoters and these regional promotions are basically saying, man, like they actually told his dad, man, if your kid doesn't smarten up, he's gonna end up in the bottom of a lake. And Vince said, what, fuck it. Like, like, they don't, oh yeah, like these guys don't own anything. It's my show. I can promote it. If they have an issue, they can promote their own show. And lo and behold, the rest of history, as you saw, Vince was smart. Vince was right, and his business vision now basically transition. Speaking of transition, now let's move on to how WWF evolved into the behemoth it was in
Right.
the golden era of wrestling. After Vince started promoting nationally, and after Vince started, basically making WWF a national kind of entity. At this point, basically, he needed a superstar, right? Bob Backlund, we talked about just, how vanilla he was. And Bob Backlund was not really that kind of look and feel. So what Vince did was he had the Iron Sheik, because at that time, the political climate and tensions between Iran, which I guess you could say kind of is, segue today, because, I mean, we're still kind of at odds with Iran. Iron Sheik with Classic Freddie Blassie as a manager was kind of a really good hot white heel, but then basically he needed the face, the guy to basically pair against him, and so that's where Hulk Hogan came to the fold, right? Hulk Hogan, I forgot his regional name. It was something else, Golden something. And then Vern Jagney wanted Hogan to kind of wrestle in Chicago, this and that. Vince decided, what, Hogan's gonna be my guy, and Hogan was actually in Rocky at that point after he signed with WWF. And then finally, the next year they made him WWE champion by being Iron Sheik. Classic match. Yeah, Thunder Lips. Yeah, Thunder Lips and Rocky, and obviously coming back to WWF, becoming WWE champion, the franchise was born. Right?
I'm gonna pause and make this interjection.
Yes.
As a wrestling fan from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, late 2010s, and in the 2020s now,
Mm-hmm.
you guys have to understand something. The world was not the same place that it is today.
Right.
You cannot continually get angry about jokes and things of that nature that people did in 2000, I mean, sorry, in 1982 and 1975. You can acknowledge them and recognize them. But what I'm gonna interject here is this: if we're talking about Hulk Hogan, we're talking about the entertainer that we see on television, the guy who we saw on our screens. We are not talking about the guy that was holding the shovel behind stage. We're not talking about the guy that was calling other people's shots in guerrilla position. We're not talking about the old man that lies about being involved with everything today. We're not talking about that guy. We're not talking about him at all. We're talking about the guy that saved professional wrestling. And that was Hulk Hogan. And I understand that other people want to be upset about it. But without Hulk Hogan in that transition period, and without Hulk Hogan in the Attitude Era, we might not have wrestling today. Not the way that you see it, not the way that I see it.
Not might. We would not have wrestling today. It's like you asked the point. We would not have wrestling as we know it. And perfect, kind of where you kind of interjected that. And again, more foreshadow, we'll get there, but we're still not there yet. Sorry, guys. Back to kind of Hogan, and kind of what this was kind of also a thing that I noticed. What Vince was saying about the Iron Sheik, because tensions were high with Iran. Vince basically capitalized on that. People basically said Iron Sheik was a very stereotypical gimmick, which to a point it was. But at the same time, obviously, like you build on racist stereotypes, and you're able to kind of build this white hot heel, right? And I think kind of with that, we saw that carry over, and we transitioned over. When we get to out here, we'll talk about this more with all these different types of gimmicks and all these different types of people of color. Basically were wrestlers. Came in. Tony Atlas even said on the documentary that Vince didn't care about about what color your skin is, but he just cared about money. But sometimes if stereotypes is what's sold, then that's what's sold. If these types of stereotypical racist gimmicks sold, that's what's sold, right? So again, that's what kind of worked, and Vince did that to cater to his audience, and so obviously Hogan being the white hot American boy, basically getting over on Iron Sheik. Again, to your point, yes, he did say wrestling as we know it, and it was something that was very profitable. Now, transitioning on, we're going to fast forward 4 years. Now, obviously, this is right after 1984. Sorry, we can't transition yet. I have to say one more thing. Now, 1985, Vince basically says, he wants to come up with a WrestleMania. He wants to come. Well, that's where WrestleMania came into form, because basically Vince decided, he went on vacation. Linda said that he's on vacation. He said, Linda, he's like, what if we have a Super Bowl for wrestling? And WrestleMania. What do we have? Muhammad Ali, right? WrestleMania. Cyndi Lauper, all the stars of the 80s. Hogan, obviously, right? Everyone that you could think of. And WrestleMania became a spectacle. WrestleMania 1. And that's what transitioned, that's when wrestling was WWE, and WrestleMania officially was now entering the golden age, right? Now we fast forward to 1987, year you were born. WrestleMania 3, 93,000 people. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant was basically a face up to this point. Hogan, Andre the Giant, that classic all-time match in front of 93,000 people in Madison Square Garden. That match basically involved, Andre basically having a bad back, Hogan working with him, trying to make it work. And also, basically that WrestleMania pay-per-view also had Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Now, Andre the Giant coming out back surgery, being 7'4", 520 pounds, right? When him and Hogan were going at it, Vince basically had Hogan because he needed someone who was believable to beat Andre. Hogan went over on Andre, and but then Andre basically is the infamous Andre told Hogan slam, and then Hogan picked him up and he slammed him, right? And so then that's when the whole mythology of Hogan was born, basically slamming a 520-pound man, 7'4" tall, and then basically making it so we could believe that this all-American hero could conquer. Dave. He was a David who can conquer any Goliath, right? Well, not only that, Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Ricky Steamboat took place on that same event, WrestleMania 3, and that is where we got to see the Macho Man is pretty big, but they were still smaller than big. They weren't 6'5", 300-pound guys, but that was a technical wrestling masterpiece. But then now WrestleMania, as we knew it, with over 80,000 and 90,000 people in that arena, obviously maybe 70,000 people. It doesn't matter how many people there were. That is what made wrestling become the staple of American culture.
Well, what Vince, and let me explain this to people. Vince McMahon's wrestling was completely and totally overblown compared to every other wrestling that was before it.
Mm-hmm.
There had never been elaborate entrances. There had never been these and don't get me wrong, there are guys that made an entrance, but what I'm talking about is nobody did it like WWF was doing it.
Right.
And riding in on chariots inside of Caesar's Palace. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot that happened over those couple of WrestleManias at the beginning. Nobody else had a Super Bowl for wrestling. You know, they just put on local shows. And let me explain the best part about this, right? There is a focused, a concerted effort in the sports world to have a penultimate event to bring everybody together and bring this all to a close. We can start again next year. The only difference in the wrestling world that we know today is that there's no off season. If they had an off season, it would be somewhere between WrestleMania and Fastlane. No, not Fastlane. It'd be not Survivor Series, not Fastlane. SummerSlam. It'd be somewhere between SummerSlam and WrestleMania. Because Payback and Backlash are in there, but you know how we feel about them. Payback and 100%. Backlash.
Yeah,
they're kind of just like big city shows more than they are pay-per-views. You know, there's a big four for a reason. There's four big ones. You know, and I really want people to understand that, like, the production value, the constantly need to get innovative, constantly need to get better. Yes, when WCW came around again, when Eric Bischoff and those guys took over, they were doing edgy things and they were trying to get through, but they were literally just turning up the gas on a fire that WWF was already cooking.
We're going to get, okay, now let's get there. All right, let's get there now. All right, we're going to talk about it because now 1987, over, done with the 80s. Now we started 1990. Eric Bischoff auditions for the WWF as an announcer. I didn't know that part of the documentary. That was really cool to see that footage. And Vince didn't hire him. They asked Vince if he regretted it. Vince says, no, I don't regret any business decision. At this point, Ted Turner is looking to kind of compete with McMahon because Ted Turner wanted WWF on the TNT broadcasting, and that basically did not happen. So as a result of that, you know, Vince and Ted decided to come up with the concept of WCW. At this time, now reminder, folks, at this time, 1990, Hulk Hogan with this belt was phasing out because essentially Hogan had been the champ for over 6 years at that point, right? Fans are tired of him. Yes. They want something new. The WrestleMania 6, 3 years after that, the year I was born, literally the day before I was born, WrestleMania 6, that's when the Warrior went over, right? Warrior had a better look than Hogan. Hogan admitted on the documentary. Logan had a better feel. But Warrior didn't really care about the business as much as others did. That's why he didn't last as long. But Warrior is still one of the greatest wrestlers, in my opinion, of all time. So that's in my opinion. Anyways, back to WCW, right? So Warrior goes over. He holds the belt for a year. That was pretty cool. Hogan basically and the other WWF stars, Macho Man Randy Savage, Ric Flair, you know, they're coming, you know, everyone's in WWF, but at this time WCW starts brewing. It starts, you know, coming up.
Yeah.
So now it's 19. Go ahead.
So, like, Vince, if you hate Vince, great. There's lots of people that hate Vince, but I want you to name me one person that's more successful than him.
Right. In the sport of professional wrestling, who is more successful than Mr. McMahon? No one. $3.5 billion. You know,
how much is it now?
No, it was $3.5 billion now. Back then, it was like $700 million.
And so you do that for $9 billion.
He did sell for $9 billion, but he basically himself and his shares are worth $3.5 billion.
His shares were. That's how much he still owns.
Correct. And so his net worth is $3.5 billion. So, backpage. Now, we know that. Now, let's get into WCW. Now, we're going to get to the juicy bits of our childhood. The Monday Night Wars, right? Eric Bischoff, Ted Turner, 1994. Obviously, fast forward 4 years later. Hogan, everyone is jumping ship because of the fact that Vince, like you said about the offseason, you made a great point. There really was an offseason. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash said, like, you know, if you're going to get paid $1 million a year, from Vince, that means you have to work 300 nights. You know, WCW was offering 100 nights off. And with the fact that you didn't have to go too far, you know, away, you know, a lot of the fans, a lot of the wrestlers wanted to stay close to their family. And they didn't want to travel on the road so much, which was the issue with WWF. And because WCW was based in Atlanta, everyone could stay in one area and still promote. And that's where the genius of Eric Bischoff came into play when he was able to come up with the Outsiders gimmick, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. They basically come into play, right? And to your point about handshakes, that's one thing that Vince did not change from his father. He still did handshake deals. He did have contract agreements. So that's what the fans did not realize, you know, the blurring the lines. And the issue with WWF at this time, This man right here, this belt I'm wearing, Bret the Hitman Hart, took over as the #1 guy for Hogan, and he was great. He was, a cool guy, but it was still kind of very vanilla. It was still kind of family friendly. There wasn't that much entertainment. It was more about good wrestling. You had Shawn Michaels, you had some guys who were edgy in the early to mid '90s, but it wasn't to the point of where it was basically coming on at the precipice Attitude Era. But now let's talk about that, right? This is now
Yeah.
mid '90s, 1995. WCW decides to put Monday Nitro on the air. They decide to compete with WWF, and at this point, they're putting out a better product because, like you said, that demographic 18 to 43, they're tuning out of this gimmicky, family-friendly show. That they want they want some gritty, they want some adult, they want some reality. NWO.
I'm going to once again do this is the first time that I've done it. Okay,
Let's go.
I'm gonna pat myself on the back with my good arm.
All righty.
I said this over 2 years ago, and the only person that agreed with me was you and our boy, who's been on this show multiple times, Just Incredible.
Yes, sir.
They agreed. You and him both agreed that Shawn Michaels started the Attitude Era.
Right.
And there's irreputable proof that it was Shawn Michaels who started the Attitude Era. The fact of the matter is, Shawn Michaels got fined for starting the Attitude Era.
Right.
And obviously he never paid it because he's Shawn Michaels. I think that aside from the Shawn Michaels fans like myself, it's weird being a Bret and a Shawn fan because sometimes you'd be like, I hate you, Shawn. And he'd be like, I love you, Bret. And then later on, I hate you, Bret. And I'll be like, I love you, Shawn. It's just weird when it's kind of like the fact that we are definitely on the island of relevancy, but we love us some Cody Rhodes.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of like that. You can like both in their own ways, and you can root for one when it makes sense. And I think that when it came to that, we didn't know. We owe Shawn Michaels an apology. Now, mind you, Shawn Michaels owes everybody else an apology, and I think that he's been doing that for the last 20 years. But we owe Shawn Michaels an apology because this is one person's fault and one person's fault only. It's yours, Vince McMahon. The same reason that Bret Hart had to age out of your company is the same reason that Shawn Michaels got replaced in your company. And the same reason why he wasn't performing the way that he had been performing previously. And that's why when he came back clean and sober, he was once again like, hey, we kind of missed that guy.
Right.
Because we remember when he came back, we were like, hey, because remember, Shawn was only supposed to come back for like a retirement match.
Right.
And that's when Vince was like, well, you can't leave now.
I love the accent. That was perfect.
Look at the pop that they gave you. Look at everything that I've done for you. And, everybody feels indebted to Vince.
Right.
And they all do. And the reason why they feel indebted to Vince is because regardless of whether or not WWF/E as a whole was always the same cast of characters, Vince always bet on his wrestlers to beat out everyone else's.
Correct.
He let wrestlers go that thought the grass was greener on the other side. And in hindsight, guys like Hall and Nash, you guys had the spotlight for a couple of years. It was great for you. But you kind of faded into being background characters in your own story. And I am not talking shit about Hall and Nash. I'm not talking smack about any of them. But when you lose a war, you eventually become a background character. And there's this meme going around right now that says WWE versus WCW, who really was better, DX or NWO? Hands down, DX.
Right.
And people are like, well, NWO did this and this. Yes, they did. But NWO became what DX didn't until they were doing it on purpose at one point. Basically, they were mocking them.
And now let's talk about that because
NWO
you just
made cartoons.
Correct. Now let's talk about that because NWO was basically hot for 83 weeks. Advancing Bret into Michaels, like you said, it was kind of like, brewing a bit, but then the seeds were getting planted. Obviously, the curtain call happened. Kevin Nash got hauled to go over to WCW. Stone Cold Steve Austin basically gets Triple H's spot King of the Ring 1996 as a result of the punishment for the current call. And then essentially, Shawn Michaels is on top of the world, beating Bret Hart for this championship on my shoulder. Bret takes it back eventually. Now we're in 1997. Ken Shamrock gets to the show. You talked about it last episode. Let's get into it. The Montreal Screwjob. Vince basically was Vince was reeling. Let me tell you, Vince was reeling heading into Survivor Series. Vince was reeling, backpedaling because
hey, we still called that correctly, but at the same time, the only reason why we called it correctly is because we had Justin Credible on the show.
correct. But let's talk about why, right? What Justin said, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, because you're going to get to my point, but I just want to make this point real quick, okay? Vince was reeling because of the fact that he had just started creating these new characters with Austin, but Rocky Maivia, and we're gonna talk about this soon. Rocky Maivia came in, this Samoan character, even though Rock was half black, right? He was Samoan from his grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia, so the fans could recognize him, but it was so forced. I mean, Bret Hart was cool, but Bret, the issue was, the WWF was tainted with scandals. I mean, they had the
They
Dr.
cheered
Zahorian.
Rock. They cheered Rock for 8 seconds. If you remember
Guy
when he
Rocky
came out, like you remember watching it too, I'm sure. When he came out, everybody was like, "Yeah, wait a minute. Why do we care?"
Exactly. And
they even got me. And I remember being a kid when this happened. I remember sitting there and watching it. I was at my grandparents' house because they had satellite cable. You know what I'm saying?
right.
We didn't have satellite cable, so we didn't have USA Network. And, so we're watching this, and he comes out with his hair bouncing and the colors, and he's got the streamers going and the tassels, and he's smiling. And I'm like, wait a minute. Who the fuck is this?
Who the fuck is this? I mean, like everyone, and that was the issue. The fans felt like it was nepotism because you only got this job because of your grandfather, High Chief Peter Maivia, and then your dad, Soul Man Rocky Johnson.
Right. And the thing is, like, Vince, I'm gonna tell you straight up. Is Vince a traditional racist? No. Is he an old white man from upstate New York and Maine? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
What I mean? That's all I have to say. Was he in an industry that didn't have black people in it? Also, yes. So an industry that traditionally had nothing to do with black people. Yes, he was in the industry. So that being said, there's a difference between someone that's a fundamental racist and somebody who has racism ingrained in their DNA because of where they came from and their colloquialisms. Vince does not hate black people, but Vince does think that there are other people that are going to be bigger draws than them. And the evidence that we have to point out is that he introduced him as Rocky Maivia, his maternal grandfather's name, not his world champion and world tag team first African-American world tag team champion father, Rocky Johnson. So if he would have just called him Rocky Johnson Jr., just like all of the other juniors that are out there, the only reason why Dustin Rhodes didn't get Dusty Jr. is because Dusty told him, you can't use the name Dusty.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then Vince saw an opportunity. Instead of calling him Dustin because it was too close to Dusty, and he didn't really want him connected to him because he hated Dusty for a while. And you know why he hated Dusty? He only hated Dusty for a while because Dusty had the ability to beat his ass at what he was trying to do.
Yep, 100%.
Dusty, he said that in the past. He had tremendous respect for Dusty, but he wanted to make him look stupid because he'd always beat him and he'd always be right when he said something. Dusty would turn a crap gimmick into gold.
Correct.
And Dusty, go watch Dusty Rhodes, guys. That dude could turn any gimmick into a winner. Any gimmick that he did himself, he could turn it into a winner. Any single one of them. Anyone. That dude went toe-to-toe with Ric Flair and made it believable.
100%.
So we'll go back to this, but that's what Vince was about. And and he's still alive. He's not dead. We're not doing this eulogy or anything like that. But I want to tell you guys from a black point of view, this is a minority podcast. There's the white people that come on the show. Sorry for calling you white. If you don't like white, we Caucasian, Italian. We can go on. We can do this all day. Any European nation, but neither one of us, are European, and neither one of us are white guys. And we do this show, and we appreciate the fact that everyone watches this show, and nobody cares about politics that watch the show. No one does, and it doesn't come up. The only reason why we mention this is a chronological timeline because this is why this is a Vince special. and you guys that need to understand, this is why this is a very special, because we're talking about what they talked about. And the number one thing that's going on right now in the sports world, my boy is gonna, elaborate a little bit.
Right, exactly. The number one thing with Mr. McMahon and obviously trial. But let's talk, and obviously WWE, but let's kind of you bring up a very good point about Rocky Maivia. And I want to get back to that, but let's kind of just focus on the microcosm of Brett and Sean and now the Montreal Screwjob, right? Vince was backpedaling heading into Survivor Series because of the fact that Eric Bischoff and WCW at that point have been beating and whooping their ass 52 plus weeks straight since the debut of the NWO. Okay. Over 1 full year of getting their ass beat in the ratings. And you mentioned satellite cable dish. We had internet, but in the Eric wrestling community was just coming into form. There was no social media. There was no streaming service. There was no YouTube. So how did you make money? By people tuning in. And if people aren't tuning into your product and WCW is live and they have Monday Night Nitro live and they're able to reveal the results of Monday Night Raw, which is taped on tape delay, I mean, you can imagine, you don't even imagine. Everyone go look up the stats. I mean, they showed it, or if you didn't see podcasts or you didn't see the Mr. McMahon DocuSeries, you can find the numbers and see how badly Eric and WCW was whooping Vince's ass. So for 83 weeks straight. That's why Eric Bischoff has an 83 weeks podcast. Anyways, now Vince is backpedaling. He's trying to find something. He basically offers Brett the 20-year contract. He tells Brett, 20 years, you stay with me, don't leave, everything's good, da da da. Then he realizes, oh shit, because now Austin's coming into the fold, and now you see Triple H, DX coming to the fold. The Rock is coming into the fold. I mean, you have Ken Shamrock just joined. Like, a bunch of these new up-and-coming stars coming for you. He goes, oh my fucking God, what the fuck did I do? Why did I give this guy a 20-year contract? That's bad business. Yeah, I mean, he's probably right. It is bad business, not just for Brett, for anyone else. Unless your name is Tom Brady, you probably don't get a 20-year contract. So, anyways, long story short, Vince in Survivor Series, he tells Brett, and basically at this point, he tells Brett, he's like, I don't have any plans for you in the future. Your gimmick is phased out. We're going to start transitioning over to a less kid-friendly show and to a more adult-themed show. Because we're going to transition, the issue that we have with this is that you are now no longer part of our future brand. We don't see you as part of the new kind of the scratch logo attitude era. And then Brett, and he said, your best move at this point, Brett, is to take this contract, find some loopholes with a 20-year contract. I can't pay you, but you can go WCW, use that for a better deal. Lo and behold, WCW offered him a $9 million 3-year deal. Historic deal at that time. Okay. Now here we are, Montreal Survivor Series. Brett was told, this is from the Mr. McMahon doc series. For those of you who haven't seen it, go. Or if you haven't seen it, there's so much information on Montreal Screwjob, but we have to go back to this because it's one of the most important moments in wrestling history. So Brett is told that, Brett and Bruce Pritchard are told that, okay, it's going to be a schmoz, which means all out brawl, no DQ, or basically DQ finish, no belt title change. Right. So they
caused that problem. All of them, the producers, they all caused that problem because once again, we've heard this in person. We've heard this in interviews. We've heard this in on documentary after documentary after documentary after documentary. We've heard this. The guys could have made it work.
Right.
If you would have left it up to Brett and Sean, they could have made it work. But everybody else made decisions for them. And I feel like I don't feel bad for them because they're all millionaires. But the point is, they both got a raw deal. Sean was irrevocably saddled with the bad boy character after that. Mr. McMahon's lackey. And he never, to this day, has been able to shake that persona. He never has been able to shake it. Even in his promos from all of his promos, you expect him to kick someone in the face. You expect him to screw somebody up. That and the fact that when Brett came back and he had that match against Vince, for my United States Championship.
Yay! Talk to him, baby. Talk to him, baby.
They didn't know I could cut promos. I could cut promos, y'all.
Yes, sir.
When they had that match, Sean tried to talk to Brett like 3 times before that. That was shoot work. And I don't think people understand that was not it was not a situation of Brett said, "I'm back here, but I'm not talking to him. Not on
Right.
TV.
Nope.
We haven't spoken." He said, "We haven't spoken a single word to each other since then. We're not going to talk now."
Nope.
And Shawn was like, "No, you're going to talk to me." He said, "I'm Shawn Michaels. You're going to talk to me. You were going to
Right,
talk to me."
sir.
So Brett came out finally. Remember, he came out begrudgingly. His microphone wasn't even on, and Shawn laid into him. This is not paraphrase. This is paraphrase, not word for word. But Shawn leaned into him, and Shawn said, "No, Brett, you don't understand how it is. I'm a guy up and coming in the company. You're the guy that's been sitting on top of the mountain with the other big dogs and the other big wigs." He goes, nobody wants to feed me. No, nobody wants to feed me. He said, "So what happens when somebody comes to you and says, 'Hey, don't worry about it. We're gonna handle it. We're letting you know that something's gonna happen, but we're gonna handle it.' What do? What would you do? You do exactly the same thing that I did. You go away with it and you walk out as champion." He goes, "So I'm going to tell you for the last time, your inability to do business with other people in this country, in this company, means that you screwed Brad." And everybody was just like, "Ooh." And I'm like, "That's not a part of the script." And if you watch it again, none of that was part of the script. That was not supposed to happen. That was not a scripted promo. He said, "You screwed yourself." He said, "Yeah, I might have known that it was going to happen, but Brett screwed Brett."
Right. And so, wow.
Me
I mean,
personally,
yeah.
I got to listen to Brett, and I understand Bret's Hart's point of view. I think that I don't think Brett would have dishonored the championship that he held up so high for so long. I do not think he would have done that. I think he would have dropped it the right way, and I think he would have dropped it just not at his house. And I think you could have given him that, and I think that you could have given. I think that he might have even dropped it to Shawn in the right place if they would have had the right conversation. But I just think that the way that things were, Vince didn't want to chance it, and he said that. He didn't want to chance it. He said, "I don't know how angry he is." Secondly, what if the people with the money got in Brett's ear because he'd already signed the contract? What if people get with the money get in his ear and they tell him this is what you're going to do, and he does it because he wants that money? And so it's like I said, losers are on all sides, man. What should have happened is Brett shouldn't have signed that contract till after he dropped the title.
You're right. Brett is, he's culpable, man. I mean, this is a Bret Hart. Let me show y'all. Let me do it. If those are watching. Can y'all read that? Can you read that, bro? Look at the camera.
Yep.
Yeah, what does that say? What does that say, bro? Read it.
It says Bret Hart. I can't see the end
No,
of
that's it. That's it. No, that's it. Bret Hart. Exactly.
Hart.
I'm a Bret Hart fan. I'm a Shawn Michaels fan. I'm sitting here today, watching this documentary, watching all the previous documentaries on the Montreal Screwjob. I still don't know whose side I'm on. I still don't know who I agree with. Do I agree with Brett? Because that was a big risk. You're right. Brett
The
would
Bret
not
Hart side
have.
of
Go ahead.
me agrees with Brett. I was mad when it happened, and I'm a Shawn Michaels fan.
But that's the
When
problem.
the Montreal Screwjob happened, I was upset.
Right.
I was upset for
Mm-hmm.
two reasons. I didn't think that Brett should have been the champion at SummerSlam.
Brett should not have won at SummerSlam. You saw him do the five-time champion.
No, I don't think he should have. I don't think he should have been the champion at all. I think it should have been Owen.
Oh, right. Owen should have. Right. Owen should have faced Austin at SummerSlam.
Owen did not get a title. He didn't get a title match.
Yes.
He beat Brett. Owen beat him in the Battle of the Brothers. Owen beat him.
Right.
And I think that Owen should have gotten an opportunity to face Austin. And I think that we wouldn't have. Shawn Michaels never would have gotten injured because the Undertaker wouldn't have been in the mix yet. The Undertaker was in the mix to basically keep Austin away from Michaels.
Right.
That's what that was all about.
Right. But you know what? To that point, I think if they made Owen the champion, yeah, actually that would have worked out because if Owen's the champion, then Brett could have just left. He could have fucked off and gone to WCW.
Yeah, he could have left.
And then, then like none of this would have happened. But anyways,
Owen wouldn't have had a problem losing it in Canada.
Owen would have done business. Because Owen didn't have beef with Michaels. Owen didn't have beef with Vince. Owen didn't have beef. They were cool. There was no issue.
Owen didn't have beef with Triple H. He didn't have beef with any of those guys. He was cool. It was Brett with the beef and Jim Neidhart with the beef, which is why they both got fired. Davey Boy Smith didn't even have beef with them.
That's why Davey was able to stay on. after years after. Anyways, back to the point.
You know,
So
and he got a pretty nice push after that too.
he did, right? He did. So back to the point, right? To what we just talked about. So Brett basically didn't want to do business. Sean was told, okay, this is, Sean wasn't even told about what the finish was. And then basically in the middle of the match, Sean does a sharpshooter. Brett says Sean didn't do it right. He told Sean how to do it right. He flipped the legs. And obviously Vince, you hear Vince, and ring the bell, and they say ring the fucking bell, and then the rest is history, right? Brett was essentially screwed. Goes to
That's the other
WCW.
thing. I don't think that they were having such a good match. I don't think either one of them wanted the match to be over.
That's exactly the point, because the match was such a technical masterpiece. It was like, wow. Like, you as a fan sitting there watching it, you're like, oh my God, this is such a good match. So why would you want that to end? And obviously, like, any type of all-time great wrestler, when they are able to put on a 5-star match like that, like, to have a finish like that overshadow the quality of the match. But then again, maybe it augments the match quality. I don't know. But I agree. I mean, they were having such a good match up to that point. Anyways, it happened, right? Brett goes to WCW. Vince McMahon now ushers in the Attitude Era. So now here we are in the Attitude Era, right? All righty, Attitude Era, folks. Now Monday Night Raw. Stone Cold Steve Austin has now basically started ascending. He wins the Royal Rumble in 1998, 3 months after Survivor Series. He is on deck to fight Shawn Michaels. He ends up beating Shawn Michaels.
You gotta talk about the fact that he obliterated Jake the Snake Roberts.
Oh yeah, I can't forget about that. So Jake Snake Roberts, 1996. Jake Snake Roberts, very, very, very devout Christian. He talks about Bible, and he says Stone Cold Steve Austin is not a good Christian man, not a man of God, this and that. And then Stone Cold Steve Austin basically beats Jake the Snake. Again, taking Triple H's spot, because Triple H was, punished for the current call. I'm glad that happened, because once after he beats Jake the Snake, he cuts the promo. You thump your Bible and you cite John 3:16. Well, Austin 3:16 says, "I just whipped your ass." The franchise was born. Now, yeah, go ahead. You gonna say something?
Vince got lucky.
Very.
He got lucky 4 really big times, right?
Right, yeah.
So we'll break. So now we're in the spot that everybody wanted us to get to.
Here we are, baby.
The curtain call started this mess.
Correct.
The Shawn Michaels kicks off the Attitude Era the moment after the curtain call is over.
Correct.
Then the Montreal screw job happens.
Solidifying.
Yes, it's fully defined at the Montreal screw job, because you went from being babyface to, wait a minute, he's not a real babyface. He's hanging out with the heels all the time, to doing heelish things all the time, like not wearing your ring gear, like coming out with no clothes on, making fun of people that normally have been left out. Shawn Michaels solidified the fact that the Attitude Era was there the day he came out in biker shorts with gauze in his pants and twerking all over the place. And the funny thing about it is, if you remember back in the day, we weren't expecting that to ever happen. And when it did happen, you were like, wait a minute, are they about to turn this off? Are they going to censor us? Or what are they going to do? And as you're watching it, you're like, this is great. This is great. This is great. And Michaels gets on the mic, and he's great. He's electric. And then he's doing the same thing. The girls are losing it. And then it continues. And then you have, an awesome King of the Ring event. And you have the guy who beat Brett. Because don't get me wrong, Austin passed out and Brett won that match. But when you want to make a star, Austin won. Brett was already at the top of the company. Austin won. Now everybody knows who Stone Cold Steve Austin is. And then Vince put Austin and Brett on the opener of the show. And so when he put him on the opener of the show, and all you see in the black and gray and white is the blood dripping down Austin's face, him screaming, and Brett tightening up the sharpshooter. And the very next scene is you see Michaels dropping somebody with a kick. I'll never forget it, dude. I'll never forget it. At the end, you see the Undertaker walking through, and then the other cast of characters that were around. But the Attitude Era was about and I'm gonna piss some people off with this. The Attitude Era, without about 10 guys, wouldn't have ever worked.
100%. Exactly what your point was. 100% valid. That's exactly why. And actually, you know what? One more detail I forgot. So now we're in January 1998. Who does WWF bring? None other Mr. Controversy himself, Mike Tyson. That's his glove right there. Anyone watch on YouTube? That's Mike Tyson's autograph right there.
You go watch
So,
Mike Tyson in his you talk about things that are suspension of belief.
mm-hmm.
You thought, okay, it's gonna be the guy with the fastest fist versus the guy with the fastest feet.
Right.
And then they decided to co-opt him, but you always thought like Mike Tyson's not a heel.
Right.
We love Mike Tyson.
100%.
Mike Tyson's more like Stone Cold Steve Austin than he is like Shawn Michaels.
Oh,
You know,
100%.
and I'm gonna tell you, we missed out on the greatest rivalry that never happened. Two of the greatest rivalries, and this is in the same era, so we can talk about this. We missed out on Undertaker versus Sting.
Yep.
And we missed out on Shawn Michaels versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. If we were able to get those two rivalries in the top of the Attitude Era, I don't think there'd be any other companies that were even close to thinking that they could challenge. And that's because Austin Michaels would have set the brand on fire. See, the thing about Taker Michaels is you never expected Michaels to win because Taker never lost.
Right.
You know, like this is the guy that's undefeated in the streak. No one expected Michaels to win, but you wanted to watch him try. And when he got injured, it changed everything. What are we going to do? Michaels can't win. Triple H isn't ready. Austin has to win this match because, and we're not blaming Taker for this.
100%.
Like, we're not blaming Taker for this, but if Austin needed to win that title, and he did everything that he was supposed to do, and I think that his time at ECW taught him how to have attitude,
right,
and how to be under control. And I think that when Michaels did go away and when he did come back, he played his role the way that he could. And I'm glad that he was able to get clean. I'm glad that he was able to find a family and, stop being a playboy. And I'm glad that what we got right now, and this is not to break what we're talking about, but if you guys didn't see NXT in Chicago over the weekend, you're going to go want to see NXT. It was the best show they've ever done. I know that you takeover guys are going to say that it was better. It wasn't. Go watch the show. Go see how good the NXT was this last week when it was in Chicago, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This is refinement here. This is a brand that's going to keep going. All of these brands are going to keep going because now you don't have a deteriorating Vince McMahon and his deteriorating faculties bouncing back between decades. Because I mean, bro, you remember how it was in 2020 and 2019 before the unfortunate events of the pandemic started.
yeah,
It was bouncing around. One week you'd have an excellent show. The next week you have trash like it was 1982.
2019 was the worst year of wrestling arguably of all time. I mean, I can't even justify that. I mean, that was just terrible. I mean,
I don't think there's
and
been a year more terrible than that one.
no, definitely. And so kind of, 100% agree. Now, I don't want to lose sight of where we are. We're in 1998, Austin Tyson, the huge crossover. Austin flips off Tyson. That makes the news. I remember watching that on the news. My parents are watching. I'm like, dude. I'm like, what? I'm 7 and 8 years old. I'm like, I'm watching this on TV, bro. This is on the TV, like the news. The 6 o'clock news. Austin is flipping off Mike Tyson. I'm sitting in my living room watching this. I'm like, oh my gosh. Now let's fast forward to WrestleMania 14. This belt. The last time anyone saw this golden winged eagle belt, let me just put that to the camera. Y'all can see that.
Where's the last time they saw it at?
They saw it at WrestleMania 14, 1998, March 30th, right before my 8th birthday.
And where did it end up?
Oh my gosh. It ended up on the shoulder of the baddest SOB and the greatest wrestler of all time, in my opinion,
Yep.
Stone Cold Steve Austin's shoulder. So let's talk about that.
Just a break. So for guys that don't understand this, The Hardcore Championship title is not the Winged Eagle title of the era. It is a replica title that they beat up in the back and gave it to Mick Foley as a joke. Like the whole hardcore title thing was not supposed to last, and it was an Attitude Era joke, and it was given to Mick Foley by Vince McMahon as a joke
And it
because
lasted 5 years.
yeah, and it lasted 5 years, but it wasn't. It was literally a replica title that they were selling at the show, and Vince thought about doing this, and the other guys in the back thought about doing this literally like an hour or two before the show started. This was
Right.
not as this was a spur of the moment thing. It was not. Everyone seems to believe that the hardcore title was the Wicked Eagle. No, it wasn't. The Wicked Eagle is put away very safely.
It's on Stone Cold Steve Austin's Broken Skull session on his Broken Skull Ranch. He holds the last version of the title.
Yes, he does.
It's a very special title to all wrestling fans. Let's talk about now, obviously, WrestleMania 14, the fallout, right? Obviously, Stone Cold Steve Austin goes over on Shawn Michaels, wins the belt with Mike Tyson's help. Tyson, who had previously been at odds at Austin, raises his hand. Michaels then goes away. He comes back here and there and on screen roles as like a GM, but he's not a competitor. So basically, now you're now in the thick of the Attitude Era because Mr. McMahon is now born, and this is where the documentary talks about it, right? Basically, WWF prior to 1990, late 97, early 98, prior to Austin becoming champion. And actually, yes, wow. One thing that they showed on the graph, it was kind of crazy. WCW from mid 96 all the way through March of 98 was whooping WWF in the ratings. March 98, 2 weeks after WrestleMania, WWF finally takes the lead. Now, I don't think the Attitude Era was necessarily a bad thing, as all the pundits say in the documentary. They all said, obviously exploiting women, racist stereotypes, chaos of like a power hungry maniacal boss, a guy beating up the boss you can't otherwise do in real life, and obviously kids like you and me who are watching it, negatively influencing us as kids. I personally think it was kind of good to have that out in the open because this is real life shit, bro. I mean, we all have to answer to somebody, but then you all want to be at a show to escape from all that. But then also you want to realize that, hey, man, shit gets real. If you want to be an NFL player, you got to fight for it. And you want anything, you got to fight for it. That's what Stone Cold Steve Austin, that's the example he set. So, anyways.
I mean, yeah, he's swimming in a pond. Like, okay, before Michaels gets injured, you're literally in an era where these guys can talk and work.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember Shamrock was already there.
Right.
You have
Shout out Ken. Shout out Ken. If you're watching this, go ahead.
We love Shamrock. We love you, Shamrock. You know that.
Yes, sir.
Shamrock was already there. There's a bunch of guys that were already there. Kane was already there. They'd already had that match in the Hell in a Cell. The casket match was where Michaels got injured. But you have to remember, nobody was expecting that injury to be that bad, especially because he kept working. And he put on some classic matches. The Austin Michaels match was better than it should have been, considering the type of injury that Michaels had. But it was pretty obvious that he was in pain the entire match, and that people were like, "Oh, I want." And the thing that always throws me off is they always interview Taker, and it's always the same speech that Taker gives. Well, I was there just in case he wasn't going to drop that belt to
correct.
Steve.
Yeah,
but I don't understand why they thought that he wasn't going to drop it, because there was no way that he was going to be able to continue performing.
Exactly. No, his back was done. I mean, he couldn't. Yeah, he couldn't go.
Said that. He said that on multiple occasions. The whole thing about losing his smile that made him depressed was the fact that, number one, this is the only thing that he loves.
Right.
We're not saying he was incapable of loving people, but he only really loved his faction, Vince, his family, and wrestling. That's the only thing that he loved. It's the only thing that he was good at. You know what I'm saying? Because he put his whole life into this since he was a child. And now at the tender age of your early 30s, you might be done forever.
Right.
I don't even think he was 30 yet, was he?
No, he was. He was 32, 33.
33, yeah. So that's a pretty early age for that's an early age for professional wrestlers. If you guys didn't know, your average professional wrestler that you like, that's at his peak, is usually around 40. That's the average guy that everyone likes. Is usually around when he gets to the top, he's usually around 40 years old. There are some young phenoms. There are some young phenoms, but just about everybody gets to about 40, and that's when they truly like they fire it up. I can't think of too many guys that were super young, other than people like Randy Orton, pretty much anybody that's not a third generation superstar doesn't usually catch fire the same way. Second or third generation superstars, because they didn't grow up in the business, and there's a thing called greenness. You gotta learn. And I think that, the greener someone is, because not even Cody shot to the top.
Right.
Ted DiBiase
Cody.
Jr. didn't shoot to the top.
Yeah, Cody.
None of the Samoans shot to the top. None of them.
Right, Cody. Right, Cody. To your point, Cody you're right. He is right on that around that 40 age when he just won his first world title. He's 38, 39 years old now. Right, he's gonna be 40 next June. I mean, yeah, you're right. I'm with you. Roman's also at the same age.
Yeah, at the
Gunther's
time, wasn't Rock the
37.
youngest world champion at the time?
Rock was that. There we go. Let's get into it, baby. As you know, baby, we're here. 1998. Now, Rocky Maivia. Let's get back to Mr. Maivia. Wasn't working. Fans hated him. Like you said, who the fuck is this guy? Why are we cheering for him? I don't know what this is. You're forced just to like this guy because he has a nice smile and his dad is grandpa wrestler? Get him the fuck out of there. What happens next on Raw? Nation of Domination.
You remember that night, bro?
We are the nation of domination. Yeah, go ahead. Talk to me. Yeah, talk about the night.
So the nation comes out. Farouk's got a match.
Yep.
And, out of nowhere, The Rock comes sliding in, clothed in black.
He's only wearing his black spandex, but it's different. Yeah. It's a shoot from the blue, the light blue, the colors. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and like his hair's a little bit different. It's a little bit shorter. It's a little bit sharper.
And slicked back.
And then you see him just start throwing kicks. And he's just stomping. And he's just stomping. And he's on top. And then you're like, and then he stands up. And they all look at each other. And then they all go in that line. And they hit him with it.
Yeah, there we go, baby.
So, and then, the promos that came after that, probably some of the best promo work. And
ever.
That's the one thing that I do not like about the current product on any level. You no longer get those Mean Gene Okerman style backstage promos. Now it's all, hey guys, what's up? How you doing? And then somebody walks up. So you thought you were looking at me tonight, huh? No, it was never like that. It was, you got those, you got real promos back then. You got 5 minutes. Fill this 5 minutes up with something incredible.
Right.
Savage, you never knew what Savage was going to do. I don't even watch the majority of backstage promos anymore because they're all the same. And it's on every level. At every level throughout the world, these backstage promos are just about the same. And I don't think anybody's going to be able to refute that, because if you look at 15 years or 20 years of backstage promos and all these companies, it always sounds the same. Nobody's going to take my title. And if you try to take my title, I'm going to beat you up. And you better bring your friends, and your friends better bring their friends. And if we're better than you, punch in the face, push them over, hit them with the water bottle, cheap shot if I'm a heel, ha ha, laugh, let's go to the ring. It didn't used to be like that, guys. And you got the now they want to do the real promos inside the ring, and only inside the ring, or at least on stage. But it used to be that you had a guy in the back and another guy in the camera, and it's just them. It's, there's no audience, and he's talking to you in that camera, and he's letting you know that as soon as he gets his hands on you, as soon as that cream comes up out, and it's gonna come to you, it's gonna get you. I'm telling you, if Hulk Hogan comes out here and gets in my face, then I'm going to drop an elbow on him. Then I'm going to start running wild. You don't get that anymore.
I love it. That's on point. That's Macho Man's Mach.
You just don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a quiet riot that you have from them. You don't get those moments. We could have had, don't get me wrong, I am all for the cinematic stuff they're doing right now, because that Cody and Roman thing gave me the chills. You know what I'm saying? That was great. People are still talking about it. They're making memes from it. They're making TikToks from it. They're doing the thing they're supposed to be doing in that area. But every once in a while, we need to have a guy backstage, and we need to have a guy saying, let me tell everybody exactly what's going on here. And we do have LA Knight, but we need to have more people tell everybody, I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna whip his ass, and then it's gonna be over. And that's how it's gonna be into the story. Because as you are well aware of, Austin, when he came out with that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so, he just said it. That was not scripted.
Right.
It became a catchphrase, the same as the Rock's catchphrases. The Rock's catchphrases, he did not script those catchphrases. Maybe now some of the ones he tries out now are because that's the way the business is going. But if you guys go back, The Rock didn't script those catchphrases. They just kind of came out. Know your role and shut your mouth. That was something that he said to fucking Farouk. You know what I'm saying? Like this was not a situation of whether he was scripting these. You know, the Rudy Poo, the jabronis, you know, all the candy asses. Like, do you remember the promo? No one remembers, but the original promo was about Austin. The original promo was, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take that boot, I'm gonna turn it sideways, shine it up real nice, and stick it straight up your candy
You
ass.
can, yes, exactly. So let's talk about. Yeah, go
You
ahead.
know,
But I mean,
even Austin was like,
you
he really
standing
said it.
there
Even
all
Austin was
greased
like,
up.
he like
Yeah, yeah. He was
Austin was like,
shocked. He
all
was,
right, yeah, you turn that
yeah,
some bitch sideways, shine it up real nice, and stick it straight up. You
straight
know,
up.
those are the types of things. I don't like. There's not too many characters that have catchphrases today. There's not too
Hmm.
many of them. You know,
Right.
now most of their catchphrases are either at the beginning of their promo or at the end of their promo, and you don't ever hear it again. Like when Cody comes out and Cody goes, "So wherever we're at today, what do you guys want to talk
What do you
about?"
want about exactly?
You know, and then you do have the Usos who are now in Yo City. You know, that's cool, but but they you're not waiting for them to drop it the way that you were waiting for them to drop it, the way that you waited for Shawn and Brett and Triple H and all these guys to drop that in the middle of their promo. We need that again. We need that again. And if anybody was able to carry that torch like Austin and Rock, everyone understands that Austin had the one up on Rock. But that was the point.
Right.
As Triple H would say, that was what was best for business. And a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but Triple H's reign of terror was what was best for business. They only made one misstep, and that was how they misrepresented Booker T. I don't think that Booker T would have won. I think that Booker T shouldn't have been typecast, and I think they should have had a great match. He should have been laying there for 25 seconds, but I think that Booker T still wouldn't have won. Triple H would continue to hold this title, but that's one little thing that you could tweak here and there and try to fix that. You know what I mean? But other than that, that reign of terror needed to happen because if you guys didn't notice, Roman Reigns was on a reign of terror for 4 years. 4 years, Roman buried everyone. Whether you guys like it or not, that's exactly what happened, including his own family members.
Now let's get into The Rock. Let's talk about the rise. You just kind of segued into it. So, Nation of Domination comes out. Rock described it on the Mr. McMahon documentary as a bunch of men of color who were just tired of being fed up with the man. And Vince said, "Stay with me. I'm going to make you a champion." Right after The Rock cut that promo of "Die Rocky Die," and he says, "You guys are," and he said, "You people don't understand greatness when it hits you." And yeah, The Rock basically, like I said, catchphrases: "Know your role, shut your mouth. It doesn't matter what you think. Rudy Poo candy ass. You know, if you smell what The Rock is cooking." All of these catchphrases came because of Muhammad Ali's influence on The Rock, and obviously Soulman Rocky Johnson, Rock's father, was actually a sparring partner with Muhammad Ali back in the 70s. 60s and 70s. So that's kind of how, The Rock was able to become ingratiated with Ali and meet him, at a young age. And
Yeah.
Ali and basically Rock, he asked permission from Ali, to use a bunch of phrases, this and that, and basically, his wife, Ali's wife, told Rock, he's like, yeah, he's like, Ali said, go ahead and do it, because Ali was a huge fan of it, and naturally the wrestling fans started gravitating towards The Rock more than Rocky Maivia, and then even when Rock became champion as a heel part of the corporation, the next year, in 1999, you saw how that shift was so seamless from heel to face. Now let's talk about your other guy you mentioned, Triple H, DX. Go
There
ahead,
there should
please.
never be a situation to where it's hard to turn from heel to face.
Right.
And that's the part that people don't understand about this sport, of this form of entertainment, whatever. You should not have a problem turning from heel to face. If you have a problem turning from heel to face, then you're probably not as good a face as you think you are. For
Right.
example, Hogan fought turning heel forever because he thought that turning heel would ruin his character. But Hogan turning heel is the only reason why WCW overtook WWF in the first fucking place.
Exactly.
They never would have overtaken them without Hogan turning heel, because the Hall and Nash thing was good, but it was just Hall and Nash. When
That's a
Hogan, when you
massive
start to
point.
realize, right, when you realize that it was that the biggest star wrestling's ever seen, we're not talking about the greatest champion. We're talking about the biggest star. Vince never cared who the champion was. He cared about who his star was. Because of the way the
Right.
business was, the star usually had the belt unless he didn't need it. And I will go back just to Michael's 1 second, but also back to Austin and Rock, and there's one, and even Brett. None of them need a title belt.
Right.
None of them. That's why the Rock's heel character right now is completely genius, because it's just the title belt that no one can take from him. He is a forever champion. Even if he lets Cody play with it, he's just like, well, I'll let you play with it for now, but I'll be back.
And he's going to be back for the belt, which you guys can't see, which I just showed you on last podcast, the undisputed title belt, which is signed by Cody. Obviously, great champion. Go ahead.
So, not just putting it on, Austin, those guys, but like those moments made you suspend, belief.
Belief. Right.
The Hogan turning on Savage immediately was like you thought he was coming out to save Savage. That's his buddy, right? No, he hates him.
He
And
hates
then
him.
you find out later that Savage hates him too.
I still remember the rap
Hulk
song.
Hogan.
Yeah, you man, Hogan. Come on, don't be a punk.
And it's funny because I wish that Savage wouldn't have died so early, but I think he really wanted to be Hogan's friend. Like for years, he wanted to be his friend, but you couldn't be friends with Hulk Hogan.
You want to fight him though?
Yeah, he wanted to fight him.
Yeah, you want to fight him.
Look at everything Hogan did to him. Like Savage played nice, but like Savage never got his proper time in the limelight because of Hogan.
And that's fine. But Savage did get enough limelight to where he's an all-time great. I have the autograph right over there. Recipe Savage.
He's Savage. Nobody is Savage.
Nobody. And nobody ever will be Mad Macho Man. I mean, come on now. It's Mach. I got, I'm looking over there in my corner. I see Booker T signed, Lex Luger, Randy Goldberg, top shelf. I mean, I'm not saying that's my WCW Mount Rushmore, but at least for like the early stages, Lex and Mach and Hogan turning heel, to your point, was so paramount to the evolution of TVG to TV14 and TV Mature and the Attitude Era of birth. So now The Rock is champion, and now The Rock is a face. Now the last kind of element of this kind of, chaotic, not even, I guess, more, there really wasn't the last element because the chaos continued, but Triple H, right? Triple H, all right? Triple H and DX, they're wreaking havoc. Triple H is cutting racist promos, here in New York, on South Asian bros like myself. It is what it is, all power to you. That was the way the industry was going. That was entertainment. Obviously DX is making chicks flash their tits. It keeps, making money. What's up? So now basically Triple H is tired of being in the mid card, and then he has to sit down with JR, Jim Ross, and he says, I'm tired. People want to punish me. They said that like they have to play the game. Well, you know what, JR, I don't play the game. I don't play the game, JR. I am the fucking game. Loved it. And then you just saw immediate switch from face to heel. And then he eventually became champion, right? So now you have The Rock, Triple H, Austin. Now you have Big Show also crossover from WCW. So now you see WCW start becoming stale and start kind of going downhill.
Well, I mean, if you have 50 members of a faction, it's probably going to grow stale. The only way that WCW would have been able to maintain what they were doing is if they changed the name of the entire show to the New World Order. Because if you're gonna have everybody in the New World Order, you might as well change the name of the show.
Correct. And I have so many new NWO autographs on my wall and Rock and so much Monday Night War, Booker, Steiner, Goldberg. I'm just looking at my wall here. You know, freaking Jericho, fucking RVD, Kurt Angle, Taker. I mean, and Scott Hall Nash too. I mean, it's like, that's what it is. So yeah, I mean, anyways, kind of long story short, it was really nice to see, kind of how Triple H kind of came in, the Kurt Angle came in. And anyways, long story short about Vince, obviously Mr. McMahon, let's kind of wrap it up with the Vince McMahon documentary. Went from Attitude Era, then it went to Ruthless Aggression Era after Rock and Austin leaves. But I think kind of, the first kind of the part of this doc series, I think it was great. I think I really like kind of seeing that. So I think now moving forward, we could probably talk about the part two, maybe on a subsequent episode, because I think we're running out of time here, folks. But essentially, I really enjoyed, kind of, this first part of the documentary. And I mean, one more thing I want to do before we wrap it up: the Owen Hart death and Owen Hart going over the edge. That was really a terrible time for the business. I think Vince decided to go, saying that he would have gone as the show went on. I know Brett felt very bad about that. Obviously his brother, he thought there would be a murdered Vince, to get back at him. Obviously, like Martha, his widow, didn't let Owen get into Hall of Fame. But yeah, essentially, kind of, I think now we'll probably pick it up from 2000 onwards. We kind of, the kind of, continuation of Attitude Era and the birth of Ruthless Aggression Era, and close out Mr. McMahon documentary series. Any last words before we wrap up this episode today, brother?
I think once again, like aside from like a couple of characters I call them characters just because, look, guys, this was produced by Netflix with the help of WWE. Like pre-pandemic is when this started, and a lot of things happened since then, and we're never gonna really know some things. For all we know, we just got worked by Netflix and every wrestler in the documentary. And if we did get worked by everybody, good job. If we didn't get worked by everybody, I appreciate the truth. At the end of the day, we have to remember that we're human beings and that we're walking a planet that is very volatile, and that at any moment a volcano can erupt. There can be a earthquake, there can be a tsunami, there can be an asteroid, and or an EMP, and none of us will ever see each other again. At any of these things can happen, and when we get an opportunity to suspend belief, then we or suspend our disbelief. I think we should. And I'll be watching the end of the documentary again just because I was like a little bit hazy on the last part, but I don't think there's any doubt that this man, Mr. McMahon, poured his whole life into this, and now I understand why he never wanted to step down, even if he made a lot of mistakes along the way.
And we'll get into those mistakes and the more darker side of things, tomorrow. I know we kind of touched on a lot of those things today. But anyway, thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back for part two soon, and we will sign off today. Have a great Thursday, y'all.
Hell yeah. All right. I'm gonna go so I can try to